Hello, Algebra 2 students. This is Mrs. Oski, and this is your first Algebra 2 lesson. So we're looking at chapter 1.1, and this is the key features of functions. Our learning target for today is I can apply key features of functions. There's 5 key features of functions that we're going to be going through. Today we are only going to do the first 2. So x and y intercepts, and then we'll look at domain and range, and then we'll save these other 3 for tomorrow. So let's start with x and y intercepts. Just taking a couple notes here. Let's define our terms. What is an x-intercept? An x-intercept is where the graph of a function intersects or crosses over the x-axis. Where the graph of a function intersects or crosses over the x-axis. And then the y-intercept is where the graph of the function crosses or intersects the y-axis. All right, and then another term that you should be familiar with, we're not going to do anything with this today, but this is a concept that builds on these intercepts, and we'll look at these later on in the year, but it's called a zero of a function. And a zero of a function is the x-intercepts, which we're going to talk about today, of a graph. So specifically the x-intercepts would be the zeros of the function. Or you could say the input values that result in a function output of 0. All right. So let's talk about success criteria. How can you successfully find x and y intercepts? First of all, step 1, you want to look at where the graph crosses over the axis. Look at where the graph crosses the axis. So if you're finding the x-intercept, you're looking at the x-axis. And if you're trying to find the y-intercept, you would be looking where it crosses the y-axis. And then you're going to write your answer as an ordered pair. All right, so let's look at some of these examples here. So this worksheet is found under classwork in your Google Classroom. We're going to do the first 2 together, and then I want you to complete the other 4 and then turn it in for your assignment. So number 1, looking at this one, number 1 here, here is your graph of the function, just a straight line. So to find the x-intercept, we're going to be looking at the x-axis. Here's your x-axis, x-axis, and then this one is the y-axis. So I'm going to highlight where this graph crosses the x-axis, and I see it's right here. The intersection of the x-axis and the graph is right here at the point 2, 0. So my x-intercept is the point 2, 0. I'm going to do the same process to find the y-intercept, but I'm going to look at where this graph crosses the y-axis. So that was my x-intercept. So my y-intercept, I'm looking at my y-axis, and I see right here is where it crosses, and that is at the point 0, -2. Now sometimes you'll also see this notation for the x-intercept, x equals 2, for the y-intercept, y equals -2. That is also acceptable, but this instruction says to write as an ordered pair, so that's what I want to see there in your work, is an ordered pair. Let's do one more example. Looking at number 2, so I'm going to find the x-intercept first, and then the y-intercept. So for the x-intercept, I'm looking at the x-axis here, and I see it crosses over at 2, the point 2. So this is the point 2, 0. Then I'm going to look at the y-axis here, crosses over here up at +2. So that would be the point 0, 2. Remember, in your ordered pairs, x comes first and then y. So the x value first and then the y value. X value, y value. You want to make a note of that. X, y is how you write an ordered pair. All right, so that is how to find x and y intercepts. Go ahead and complete the rest of that worksheet on your own and turn that in. Now let's move on to domain and range. Domain and range. So that is the second key feature that we're looking at for the key features of functions. So let's define our terms. Domain is defined as the set of all possible inputs. So these are our x values. The x values. So when we're talking about domain, we're always talking about x values. And then the range is a set of all possible outputs. And here we're talking about the y values. So domain is x, range is y. So how do you find domain and range? So if you're looking at a graph and you want to tell the domain and range of the graph, let's start with domain. So first, we're going to find the domain. So the domain is the x values, like we said above here. And when you're looking at the x values, you're looking at the x-axis, and you're going to start with the lowest to the highest. So domain is the x values, lowest to highest, or least to greatest. And when you're looking on the x-axis, so here's our x-axis here, to the left is negative, and to the right of the origin is positive. So lowest to highest is going to go left to right. Now, let's talk about range. So to find range, you're looking at the y values. Again, lowest to highest or least to greatest. So here's your coordinate plane. Here's the y-axis here. So from the origin, as you go up, that's positive, and as you go down, that's negative. So if you're looking at your graph, you're going bottom to top. All right, once you figure out those values, now you have to give an answer. So there's two ways you can give an answer. The first way is called interval notation. Let's see, write answer. Oops. Answer in interval notation. And then the second way is called set builder notation. Right answer in set builder notation. And you do need to know how to do both notations. So let's talk about interval notation. Interval notation uses parentheses and brackets. So if you are using a parenthesis, that means you have an open circle. So you use parentheses for open circles or for arrows on your graph. You use brackets for closed circles. And I'll show you what that looks like. We're going to do several examples in just a second. And then set builder notation is a little bit fancier. You start with that fancy bracket, and if I'm doing domain, it's going to be X, because remember domain is dealing with X, all the X values such that X, and then you would write the two numbers that X falls between. And you're going to use the less than sign for open circles, and you're going to use less than or equal to for closed. And then the same thing for range. Start with the fancy bracket. Remember, range is Y, so you're going to use Y such that Y, and then you would put your two values there, and again, use the proper notation here. So keep this handy. Just kind of set it to the side, and we're going to do some examples here. I'm going to do this whole page of examples. Just try to follow along. And then in Google Classroom is posted 2 more worksheets like this for you to practice, and I want you to do those. So let's look at some examples here. So if I'm looking at a graph, I'm going to start with domain. Remember, domain is X values, so I'm looking at my X axis. So I'm going to see where's the furthest X value, or the lowest X value, furthest to the left. The graph, if I keep going here, that's as far as it goes to the left. So that's my starting point. And that is at -4. Okay, then I'm going to go left to right. So where's the highest point to the right? And it ends here. So I follow that down and I see that it stops at 2. The X value of 2. Remember, domain is X, range is Y. Now I need to figure out my my parentheses and brackets. So I'm looking at -4. -4 is an open circle, so that gets a parenthesis. And at 2 is closed, so that gets a bracket. And this is called interval notation. Let's look at range. So range is y value, and I'm going bottom to top, lowest to highest. So the bottom of the graph is here at -4. And then the top of the graph is here at +5. Open at 4, -4, so you get a parenthesis, closed at 5, bracket. So that would be the interval notation. Now let's look at set builder notation. So domain would be, start with your fancy bracket. Domain is x, so it's going to be x such that x, and then I'm going to put my two values. X is in between, it's all the values in between -4 and 2. Close my fancy bracket there. Now I'm going to look at -4. -4 is open, so that's a less than. And then 2 is closed, so that's a less than or equal to. Range. So range is y values. So all the y values from -4 to 5. -4 is open, 5 is closed, so that gets the or equal to because it's closed. Let's do another one. All right, number 2. Domain. Domain is x values. I'm looking at the x-axis, so I'm looking at my graph. Where's the furthest the graph goes to the left? Right here. And what is the x value there? Follow it up. That's at -2. Where's the furthest it goes to the right? Here at +2. Okay, now I need my either parentheses or brackets. They're both open, so they're both gonna get parentheses. Moving on to range. Remember, range is the y values, so I'm looking at all the y values, bottom to top. Where's the very lowest point of the graph? Right here at -3. Top of the graph here at 5. This is open, so it gets parentheses. This is considered closed, so that gets a bracket. All right, let's look at set builder. Domain. Fancy brackets. X such that x is in between -2 and 2. They're both open, so they're both less than. Close your fancy bracket. Range. Fancy bracket. Y, remember range is y, such that y is in between -3 and 5. All the values in between -3 and 5. This is open, less than. Bracket closed, less than or equal to. Done. Let's do another one. Okay, domain. Domain is x. Domain is x, so all the way to the left, -2. Looking at the x values here. All the way to the right, +2. And they're both open circles, so parentheses. Now let's look at the range. Bottom of the graph is right here. I'm looking at the y-axis, so the value of y is -3 right there. Top, 5. Closed, open. Set builder. Domain, fancy bracket, x, such that x is in between -2 and 2, both parentheses, both open, so less than. Range, fancy bracket, y, such that y is in between -3 and 5, bracket, less than or equal to, parenthesis, less than. Pause the video, try to do number 4, and then we'll check it. Okay, let's see how you did. Domain, x values. So I'm looking at the x-axis. Furthest to the left is here at -4. Furthest to the right is here at -2. Looking at the x values there. Open, that is considered closed. So bracket. All right, range, looking at the y-axis, the y values. Bottom of the graph is here at -4. Top is there at +4. So -4 to 4, open, open, parenthesis, parenthesis. Set builder, domain, x, such that x is in between -4 and -2. Lesson, and then less than or equal to. Range, y, such that y is in between -4 and 4, less than, parenthesis, less than, and fancy bracket. Try the next couple on your own. Go ahead and pause the video. Okay, let's check it. Domain. Oh, look at this. That's a tricky one. That goes right in between there. So that's at 1/2 or 0.5, you could say. That's considered closed. So -0.5. Right here would be -0.5. And then to 4. Open, parenthesis. All right, looking at the range, the y values, the bottom is here at -4, top at +1, both open. So both parentheses. Domain, set builder, x such that x is in between -0.5 and 4. Bracket gets the less than or equal to, parenthesis gets the less than. Y such that y is in between -4 and 1, and they're both less than. All right, last example. Domain is -2 to +2, closed, open. Range, we're going -4 to 0 here. The solid bracket overrides the open. So you're going to use the bracket here. The solid dot gets the bracket. Even though they're equal, you're going to go with the bracket because 4 is included. And then 0 is also included. So you're going to make that a bracket. X such that x is in between -2 and 2, less than or equal to, less than. And then finally range, y such that y is in between -4 and 0. And they're both less than or equal to. They're both closed. They both have the bracket there. All right, hopefully that was helpful and you're able to do lots of practice. I included 2 more of these worksheets, so that's 16 problems to practice domain and range. So at this time, go ahead and stop the video and get your work done.